The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, commonly known as the ATF, is at a critical juncture. The agency needs a new direction, one that respects the foundational principles of our nation. For too long, this agency has operated with a blatant disregard for the Constitution, particularly the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. This has led to widespread discontent and protests from those who feel their freedoms are being trampled upon. The Second Amendment is a cornerstone of American liberty, guaranteeing the right to keep and bear arms. Yet the ATF's actions have often undermined this essential freedom. Appointing another career law enforcement officer to lead the ATF would be a grave mistake. Such a choice would likely perpetuate the same patterns of overreach and abuse that have plagued the agency for years. This would not only be a disservice to the American people, but also a violation of the principles of justice and fairness. The cycle of overreach must be broken. We need a leader who understands the Constitution and is committed to upholding its principles. This means respecting the rights of individuals while effectively addressing criminal activity. The ATF has a history of targeting innocent gun owners while failing to effectively combat actual criminal activity. This misallocation of resources has led to a loss of trust and credibility. This pattern of behavior is a direct result of the agency's culture, which prioritizes enforcement over freedom. This culture needs to change if the ATF is to regain the trust of the American people. The current culture within the ATF views law-abiding gun owners as potential criminals rather than valued citizens. This adversarial approach is counterproductive and harmful. Law-abiding citizens who exercise their Second Amendment rights should be seen as partners in public safety, not as threats. A shift in perspective is urgently needed. A career cop at the helm would only reinforce this misguided mindset. We need a leader who can bring a fresh perspective and challenge the status quo. We need a leader who will stand up for the rights of individuals and ensure that the ATF operates within the bounds of the Constitution. The next ATF director must be someone who understands that the Second Amendment is not a suggestion. It is the supreme law of the land. This understanding is crucial for restoring trust and ensuring justice. Choosing a leader who prioritizes enforcement over freedom is a recipe for disaster. It will lead to more abuses, more infringements on our rights, and further erosion of trust in government. The American people deserve better. The Constitution demands better. We must hold our leaders accountable and ensure that they respect the rights and freedoms that define our nation. The future of the ATF and the protection of our constitutional rights depend on the choices we make today. Let us choose wisely and demand a leader who will uphold the principles of liberty and justice for all. President Trump understands the dangers of entrenched bureaucracy. He recognizes that when individuals stay too long within the same system, they often become part of the problem rather than the solution. The bureaucracy can become a self-serving entity, more focused on preserving its own power and influence than on serving the public good. To counter this, he has chosen individuals from outside the traditional power structures to lead federal agencies. These leaders are not career politicians or long-time government employees. Instead, they are people with real-world experience who have proven themselves in other fields and brought a fresh perspective to the table. Importantly, they are not beholden to the special interests and careerist mentalities that often plague Washington, D.C. They do not owe their positions to political favors or backroom deals. This independence allows them to make decisions based on what was best for the country, rather than what was best for their careers or their political allies. The next ATF director should be chosen in the same mold. We need someone who is not a product of the system, but rather someone who can look at it with fresh eyes and a critical mind, someone who can identify the inefficiencies and the areas where the agency can improve. We need someone who will shake up the agency, not someone who will simply maintain the status quo. This person should be a reformer, someone who is not afraid to make the tough decisions and take the necessary actions to bring about meaningful change. The ideal candidate will be a staunch defender of the Constitution with a proven track record of challenging government overreach. They should have a deep understanding of the principles upon which our nation was founded and a commitment to upholding those principles, even in the face of opposition. This individual must be willing to stand up to the powerful gun control lobby and its allies in the media. They must be prepared to face intense scrutiny and criticism, and to defend their positions with facts and reasoned arguments. They must be willing to fight for the rights of law-abiding citizens even when it is unpopular. This means standing up for the Second Amendment and ensuring that the rights it guarantees are not eroded by those who seek to impose more restrictions on law-abiding gun owners. The Second Amendment is not negotiable. It is a fundamental part of our Constitution and our way of life. It guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and this right must be protected. It is a cornerstone of our liberty. The right to bear arms is not just about hunting or self-defense. It is about ensuring that the people have the means to defend their freedoms against tyranny. It is time for a leader who will stand strong against the forces that seek to undermine our freedoms, someone who will fight for the principles upon which our nation was founded and ensure that those principles are upheld for future generations. The ATF's history is littered with examples of egregious misconduct. Over the years, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives has been involved in numerous controversial operations that have raised serious questions about its methods and accountability. The tragedies at Waco and Ruby Ridge stand as stark reminders of what happens when government agencies operate with unchecked power. These events are etched into the collective memory of the nation as symbols of governmental overreach and the devastating consequences that can follow. These incidents were not isolated mistakes. They were the inevitable consequences of a culture that disdains individual liberty. The actions taken by the ATF during these operations reflect a broader issue within the agency, a systemic problem that prioritizes aggressive tactics over the preservation of life and liberty. In Waco, the ATF's botched raid on the Branch Davidian compound resulted in the deaths of dozens of innocent men, women, and children. The siege, which lasted 51 days, ended in a catastrophic fire that claimed the lives of 76 people, including 25 children. The operation was intended to serve a search warrant, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown military-style assault. This horrific event should have served as a wake-up call, but sadly it did not. Instead of prompting a thorough re-evaluation of tactics and policies, the ATF continued to engage in operations that put lives at risk and undermined public trust. Just a few years later, the ATF was involved in another deadly standoff at Ruby Ridge, where a family was terrorized and innocent lives were lost. The incident began with a failed attempt to arrest Randy Weaver on a firearms charge and escalated into a violent confrontation that resulted in the deaths of Weaver's wife, son, and a U.S. Marshal. More recently, the ATF's disastrous Fast and Furious operation facilitated the flow of weapons to Mexican drug cartels, leading to the deaths of Americans, including a U.S. Border Patrol agent. The operation, which was intended to track the movement of firearms, instead allowed thousands of guns to fall into the hands of criminals, with deadly consequences. These examples demonstrate a clear pattern of recklessness, incompetence, and disregard for the Constitution. The ATF's actions have repeatedly shown a troubling lack of accountability and a willingness to violate the rights of individuals in pursuit of their objectives. These incidents are not merely historical footnotes. They are part of a larger narrative of government overreach and the erosion of civil liberties. Each event serves as a stark reminder of the potential for abuse when power is concentrated in the hands of a few. They are symptomatic of a deeply ingrained culture of arrogance and impunity within the ATF. This culture has been allowed to fester for far too long, leading to repeated instances of misconduct and a growing distrust among the public. This culture must be dismantled if the agency is to have any hope of regaining the trust of the American people. True reform will require a commitment to transparency, accountability, and respect for individual rights. Only then can the ATF begin to rebuild its reputation and fulfill its mission in a manner that upholds the principles of justice and liberty. A constitutional originalist would approach the ATF with a clear mandate: downsize its power and refocus its mission on protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. This means ending the agency's obsession with harassing gun owners and dealers. It means prioritizing the prosecution of actual criminals, not the creation of new ones through entrapment schemes. The Second Amendment is not a second-class right. It is a fundamental right that is essential to a free society. The ATF should be in the business of defending this right, not undermining it. The next ATF director must be someone who understands that the best way to reduce gun violence is to enforce existing laws, not enact new ones that only serve to punish the innocent. The Constitution provides a clear roadmap for a more just and free society. The next ATF director must be someone who is willing to follow it. The future of our republic may depend on it. Stay frosty, my friends. The fight for our rights is far from over. Keep your head down and your powder dry.